Let's do this, guys! Whoa! Are you ready for some trivia? Let's get to it. Besides Lara Croft and the Guardian of Light, Lara Croft and the Temple of Osiris, the level editor, and the action adventure, how many Tomb Raider video game spin-offs are there? A. 18, B. 16, C. 13, or D. 21. How many of you are ultra fanatics of Lara Croft? We'll let you know what the answer is at the end of the episode. Hey fanatics, welcome to the So I'm a Fan of podcast, where people from different fandoms come together to share why they love what they love.
And sometimes hate what they hate.
I'm your host, Kaiser Brown, and today I'm joined by, of course,
Sabrina Gill, the best co-host. Anyway, Kaiser, what are we talking about today?
So, I'm a fan of Tomb Raider. Let's get to it. Hey Sabrina, how are you today?
I'm doing good. Excited to talk about Tomb Raider. Fun stuff.
Fun
See the
stuff.
icons.
So, what do you know about Tomb Raider? What's your experience with the franchise, with Lara Croft in general?
So I'll be honest and say that I don't have much of a background. Obviously, I know who she is and the symbol that she represents, of course. When I was younger, like my most vivid memory is, of course, my mom playing the Tomb Raider movie. RIP. But aside from that, I don't have much experience like from playing the game or anything like that. But of course, I did study a little for our fun little talk today. But outside of that, I don't have much experience.
Me, I have like a decade or so experience with Tomb Raider, a little over a decade. It was when I first discovered Tomb Raider when I was going on those sites where you could play like video games, like on these ROM sites, right? And so you could play like Game Boy Advance games and stuff like that without having to download them on your computer. So I went on those ROM sites and I played like a Tomb Raider game on one of those. It was like a Game Boy Color game, but I didn't know it was Tomb Raider at the time. Then a few years later, in 2013, I went on IGN and I saw that they had this preview that they were doing. It was a live preview where they had the creators on there playing the Tomb Raider reboot game. And I thought it was so interesting and so fun. So I went out and just dived straight into Tomb Raider. I went and played Tomb Raider 1 on my phone. This was when it was on iOS. Tomb Raider 1 isn't the first Tomb Raider game I played. It was actually Lara Croft and the Guardian of Light. And then I played Tomb Raider Underworld. And then a few years after that, they put Tomb Raider 1 on iOS and Tomb Raider 2 on iOS. And I played those on my phone. And then I have Tomb Raider The Last Revelation. I have that on my Steam PC. Tomb Raider and Angel of Darkness. I played that as well. Tomb Raider Legend. Of course, like I said, Tomb Raider Underworld. All three of the Tomb Raider reboot series. So Tomb Raider, Rise of the Tomb Raider, and Shadow of the Tomb Raider. And I also have Lara Croft and the Temple of Osiris. But I never played that one yet. That one's on my Steam. I looked on my Steam the other day because I haven't been on Steam in a long time. And it said I hadn't been on Steam in like 4 or 5 years since 2020. So I have all these some games on there that I haven't played that I got on there. One of them being Lara Croft and the Temple of Osiris. But by that time, the laptop I used to play my games on like died and never came back to life. That's why I just never went back to Steam, even though I used to spend all my time on there. But yeah, that's my history with Tomb Raider. And of course, I never seen any of the movies actually. But Tomb Raider does have an anime coming out on Netflix this year. And it does have 3 movies, even though I never watched any of them in full. And it also had a web series or something like that. I forgot what it was. Oh, and they had like little short animated things. And that was fun. It was fun to see Lara Croft animated. I'm excited to see her animated in a full-on series for once, because I've been wanting that for years. I love Lara Croft. She is so amazing. So maybe we should get into it and who Lara Croft is as a character. Are you ready?
Of course. Woo!
All right, let's get into the history of Tomb Raider. Part 1, the original timeline. So first, we're going to start off with the original timeline and who Lara Croft is. Lara Croft is a character and the main protagonist of the video game franchise Tomb Raider. She is highly intelligent and athletic, and an archaeologist who ventures into ancient tombs and hazardous ruins around the world. She is depicted as an athletic woman with brown eyes and dark auburn hair, frequently kept in a plait or ponytail. The character's classic costume is a turquoise leotard, light brown shorts, calf high boots, and tall white socks. Accessories include fingerless gloves, a backpack, a utility belt with holsters on either side, and two pistols. The video game sequels introduce new outfits designed for different environments, such as underwater and cold weather. Do you know about Lara Croft's iconic costume, Sabrina?
So if I remember correctly, it's like the so I wanna say it's like the crop tank and, like, the
Uh-huh.
khaki shorts and
Yeah.
then obviously the twin pistols.
Mm.
I don't know what kinda shoes this girl's wearing. Her kicks, I ain't remember. Probably some kind of, like, hiking boot or something. Because I wouldn't be climbing through no caves or spelunking or doing none of that hard work and no heels or no tennis shoes. You gotta have them boots. They made for walking.
Do you think that her outfit actually makes her stand out as a character? Does it make her just a bit more iconic? Because I see her that's the outfit that whenever anybody says Lara Croft, that's the outfit that I imagine her in. But as someone who's, like, never played a Tomb Raider game, what do you think?
So, of course, like, the outfit is like you said, it's iconic, like, when I think of her, that's, like, what I picture. Whether or not it's, like, practical or I don't know. So, obviously, with many games like that that started out fairly early, like, in development of, like, video games, she's definitely very what's the word? I wanna say sexualized, but not in a bad connotation, but she definitely obviously has that appeal, which isn't necessarily bad, but I feel like in, like, newer topics of discussion of, like, women in video games, it's one of those things where maybe she could have had I would like to preface and say I don't remember specific titles of any of these games, but I know as they came out, if you will. So, like, in some of the studying I did, I wanna say it was the newest, if not the 2nd newest game of Tomb Raider, I liked her outfit a little more in there because I felt like it was a little more realistic of a person in that circumstance, like, she still had a similar tank, the shorts, but
Mm.
it wasn't like, say, the original Tomb Raider 1 where, no offense, she had triangle boobs and her tank top, like, she was obviously meant to be this hot woman going through these tombs, doing all this cool stuff. I just feel like it's not as practical for her circumstance and doing all the cool, amazing things she does, but I don't think it's, like, a bad outfit, but I wouldn't wear it against those jungle mosquitoes or doing all the crazy stuff she does. I feel like the khakis would chafe for sure, and I don't know, pardon my, like, oversharing, but I sweat a lot, so that little gray tank top, I would get red to filth, I say. Not that anybody else would be watching if I was actually a treasure hunter like that, but still. Like, how do you feel, Kaiser? Would you wear that outfit to go raid some tombs?
I don't wear shorts, so that's already no.
I know.
But, like, a variation maybe. Because why not? I wanna look cool when, like, raiding tombs with my dual pistols and stuff. I will say that the reboot Lara Croft is more practical in the things that she wears, and they just released because with the Tomb Raider games now, they're trying to unify the timelines with the newest game, whatever that game's gonna be.
Mhm.
Don't know yet, but they did release artwork of what the unified timeline Lara Croft will look like. I I do wanna see how they make that work because she is in her classic outfit, but I do like, the idea of her also dressing in, like, more practical stuff, so I hope they give, like, a whole bunch of outfit options as well, because that's what I like about the reboot lore as well. She took some of the iconic outfits and made them a bit more practical, so I wanna see both sides of that because you can't, like, remove the iconic outfit, you know what I mean? You can, you know what I mean? It's not in every Tomb Raider
Yeah.
game, but it's iconic.
That would be like getting rid of Link's, like, classic outfit because it's like, "Aw, man, what little young boy would run around in a tunic like that in the
Mhm.
forest?" Yeah, I can't you can't get rid of the tunic. It's my man
Yeah.
symbol. Which I think that's, like, an also, like, interesting, like you said, like, a customization component, like, that kind of although, say, the experience, like, everybody follows the same story, it allows for a more, like, personalized experience per
Yeah.
player.
Every
Um
Tomb Raider game since Tomb Raider 2 has offered different, like, outfit variations and stuff, so they're gonna do it, but I wanna see, like, a mix. Like, I like the original outfit. Obviously, I wanna play that in like, a modern video game setting, but I also wanna see a whole bunch of just, like, different other outfits and things like that too as they unify the timelines and we see this new Lara Croft and whatever she does, you know what I mean? So, it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So Lara's backstory has changed dramatically over the course of the series. During the first era, beginning in Tomb Raider, which happened in 1996, she is described as the London born daughter of Lord Heshingley Croft and Lady Croft. She was raised as an aristocrat and betrothed to the fictitious Earl of Farringdon. At the age of 21, she survived a plane crash, which left her as the sole survivor and stranded in the Himalayas for 2 weeks. The experience spurred her to shun her former life, which she already viewed as stifling and boring, and seek other adventures around the world. She only felt truly alive when she traveled the world alone. During the next 8 years, she acquired an intimate amount of knowledge of ancient civilizations across the globe. Croft published books and other written works based on her exploits as a mercenary, big game hunter, and master thief. These provided her with a replacement source of income after her father disowned her over her change in lifestyle. Depending on who you ask, the Earl of Farringdon is probably still waiting on her because they're engaged and she just never returned his calls or whatever. So
Ghosted.
Toby Gard created Lara Croft while working for the game development studio Core Design in Derby, England, which mainly developed games for home computers and Sega consoles. Some games include Asterix and the Power of the Gods, Battle Corps, and Soulstar. None of those games I have heard of, sorry to tell you, but I put them in there so maybe
Mhm.
some kid or adult who used to play those games knows what I'm talking about. Do you know any of those games?
Huh. Huh, 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 huh. No. No,
Well,
no, I don't.
let's move on. The company was looking for game concepts for the upcoming PlayStation console, with the concept of the game being created before anything else. They wanted it to be a 3D, cinematic, and character driven experience. When Guard first had the concept about the game, the then male character resembled Indiana Jones, who had a whip and a hat, which was, of course, changed for legal reasons. He did want to give the player a choice of genders, but because it would double the work, he decided to discard the male character and just go with the female one. Originally a tough South American woman named Lara Cruz, the character went through several changes, including idols pushing to make her male, but eventually settled with the character Lara Croft after idols executives in the US objected to her original name. This made her more UK friendly. While she was based off Indiana Jones, she also took inspiration from Swedish pop artists Nanette Sherry, Tank Girl, and John Woo from Hardboiled, with the latter being the inspiration for her iconic dual pistols. If you look at a lot of her earlier designs, you can see that she also has a lot of anime influence. Now, Sabrina, I want to ask you. So now we have Lara Croft, this British aristocratic white woman who is like tough as nails and cool and stuff. But do you think that it was a
Mhm.
good idea for her to be changed from Lara Cruz to Lara Croft? Do you think we might have missed something with her being Lara Croft instead of Lara Cruz? Or do you think it was a good idea?
So, honestly, I guess it just depends on the perspective of story-wise, like, how you were anticipating this character. Like, on the surface level, this idea of, in a sense, this very privileged woman, like,
Right.
deciding on a whim, like, after a near-death experience that she just wants to go and live a wild life, it suffices for some people. It's like, "Oh, you know, crazy rich people decide to go off and do stuff like this all the time. They got the money for it and the time, obviously." But I feel like at the same time, I feel like there could have been a different story to tell with maybe a different main character. Something that may have been a little more like speaking to maybe I say like social issues of the time or like stuff that may even resonate today with women who don't have power, if you will, through social status and upbringing,
Oh,
having to, in a sense, like maybe meet these ways. I don't know.
well, would her being Lara Cruz, would that have affected that part? Not affected. Would that have caused her not to be an aristocrat, do you think? I would assume that she would still have been like an aristocrat
Well,
as long.
maybe I guess you're right. But I feel like at the same time, like, it also I feel like it would've offered more representation, maybe, is what
Mhm.
I'm thinking.
Yeah.
It would've allowed, like, more diversity in maybe but then again, also, there's the we haven't got to that part yet, but, like, the controversy of, like, her appeal, being taken into media,
Mhm.
and maybe it was okay that it was a white woman.
Yeah.
Mm.
I
No.
feel like as Lara Cruz, seeing how women of different ethnicities and things are portrayed and sexualized differently, She probably would have been sexualized more,
Yeah,
first of all, but I do think that
yeah.
would
It's like
yeah, I do think they will have that will have something to say though, as this South American woman being a rich aristocrat and going out on all these adventures because that's I feel like there's a certain power to that, that a white
yeah,
woman, it just doesn't sound as cool. Now, I love Lara Croft, don't get me twisted, and I don't mind that she's white, but I do like
yeah,
the possibility of Lara Cruz existing and showing, like, this person of color being at the top of, like, the food chain and doing whatever she feels like she wants
yeah,
to do, you know what I mean? And she goes and becomes an archaeologist just because she wants to, and that's really cool. I like
yeah.
that because the idea that, like, that can only just be a white person who's rich and can do all this and that and the other, I think that's stupid, but
I think she would've been okay, this is gonna sound weird.
mhm.
I think she would've been, like, spicier. I feel like she would've maybe hit a little differently for me. Like, maybe I would've been a little more invested. Obviously, it's not obvious in my appearance, but my dad is technically fully Hispanic, and so, I guess as a kid who, like, I
Mhm.
wasn't allowed to, like, necessarily because we lived in an area that it wasn't, like, necessarily good to be Hispanic, a very, like, white area, and so I wasn't allowed to learn Spanish and stuff like that, so maybe seeing, like, a character who is Hispanic and be
Mhm.
like, "Oh my gosh, she's a baddie." Maybe that would've been a little more inspiring for, like, young Sabrina and other young little kids like me in that kinda circumstance who was like, "Oh, I wanna be an amazing archaeologist." But
Carry
at the same
smoke.
time, it came out as it will. Maybe one day we'll get her. Maybe it'll be like an alternate universe. We'll get like across the Lauraverse instead of across the Spider-Verse, it's across the and it's like all of the Lara Crofts, and then it's what could have been with Laura Cruz.
Could be, could be. But I
That would've been
love
so cool.
Lara Croft. So, Laura, I love you. Don't get it twisted. I'm just looking at the possibilities of what could have been, and I find it interesting how your history went like that. So, the character in the first game is voiced by Shelley Blonde, and this is the only time she played the character until she returned to voice her in 2022 for the mobile game Tomb Raider Reloaded. The team used real archaeological locations that represented several cultures, and the game focused mainly on platforming and puzzle solving. In 1996, Eidos Interactive purchased Core, with there being a team of six who, for the past 3 years, worked on this Indiana Jones style video game. The team settled on a system of square tiles that divided the world into a grid. This tricked the eyes into seeing fully textured surfaces and became known as the level editor, which allowed for seamless level creation. It allowed developers to make rapid adjustments to areas with ease, and the levels were designed with a wireframe construction and went from there with archaeological elements, traps, enemies, and effects being added later on. Until this day, the level editor is still being used by fans because they released a version of it for the fans to make like their own Tomb Raider levels. To this day, that level editor is still super popular. You can search it up on YouTube and everything, new videos all the time. I just find that so interesting that something like that can stand the test of time. So, while the game had 10 controls compared to other games, it worked quite smoothly, even being able to play today without too much of a problem if you wanted to. Nathan McCree composed the music for the game, with his main inspiration being English classical music. There were no time for rewrites, so each track were just put in the game as they were first composed. What separated this game from others at the time was that there was no musical track playing consistently throughout the game. They instead used limited musical cues that played during key moments for a dramatic and more atmospheric effect. The majority of the game was just action effects, atmospheric sounds, and Lara's grunts and sighs. And you hear a lot of those grunts and sighs because you're like literally just climbing and jumping around everywhere. But I do think, especially in the older Tomb Raider games, because that's when they were a bit more atmospheric, just like the quiet nature of those games really did add to the experience, I think. And that's what I really like about the classic Tomb Raider games overall. You don't hear music all the time. Sometimes it's just like quiet, and then sometimes it gets scary, and all of a sudden you hear like this musical cue, and then all of a sudden there's an enemy there. You have some wolves chasing you, or there's this gigantic ball like falling towards you. You got to make sure it don't knock you in a river and stuff like that. I love that about Tomb Raider games. So, the game was split into four zones: Peru, Greece, Egypt, and Atlantis, with the extra training level Croft Manor being accessible through the Start menu. The game is a third person action adventure, and a player guides Lara through different locations, searching for artifacts, killing dangerous animals, while collecting objects and solving puzzles. Although the game uses tank controls, Lara can walk, jump over gaps, shimmy along ledges, roll, swim through bodies of water, perform handstands, hang off ledges, execute swan dives, draw weapons and lock onto nearby enemies, pick up items, pull switches, fire guns, push and pull blocks, and have an inventory that stores ammo, medipacks, artifacts, and keys. With the only weapons of Lara's that don't require ammo being her dual pistols, which came with unlimited amounts of bullets. That's a lot, isn't it?
Yeah, that's more than I can do.
I wish, cause sis be climbing on stuff, and then all of a sudden she'll do a handstand when she's climbing on a cliff, and then like doing the whole thing and flipping around. I love Lara Croft. Okay, so
Bro, I couldn't even lift myself up.
if you train, maybe you can.
If
You
I
like Lara
crashed
Croft?
in an airplane and had to survive 2 weeks in the Himalayas, I would make it. But in my current physique and in my current life experience, I would not make it. Laura would leave me behind. It's fine.
That might be a thing that she does, but we'll get to that. So, the story of the first game follows Lara Croft being approached by a mercenary named Larson who works for a businesswoman named Jacqueline Natla. She recruits Lara to acquire the Scion, an artifact buried in the tomb of Qualopec in Peru. She later learns about being ambushed by Larson, that Natla is only using her and hired a rival treasure hunter named Pierre Dupont to get the other two pieces of the Scion. Lara goes on to retrieve another piece for herself by traveling to an ancient monastery and eventually reaching the tomb of Theoken. She discovers that Theoken unsuccessfully tried to resurrect Atlantis after it suffered a great catastrophe. Killing Pierre along the way, she discovers that only one of the three holders of the Scion pieces betrayed the other two and used the artifact to create a breed of monsters before being captured. After making her way to Egypt, retrieving the third piece, and killing Larson, she is ambushed by Natla and her henchmen. Lara escapes and stows away in Natla's yacht, leading her to a volcanic island with an Atlantean pyramid filled with monsters. Later on, though, through defeating the henchmen and reaching the Scion, Lara discovers that Natla was the Atlantean betrayer all along and plans to use her monster army to push forward humanity's evolution, believing that Atlantis and current civilization are too soft to withstand disaster. As Lara attempts to destroy the Scion, Natla attempts to stop her. After a battle with a large, legless monster, Lara shoots to complete the Scion artifact, setting off a chain reaction, destroying the pyramid and causing the island to explode, which Lara escapes after killing Natla. That was a lot, wasn't that? Oh my gosh. Did you expect Tomb Raider to be such a supernatural series?
Honestly, no. Like, from what I remember, keep in mind, I haven't watched that Tomb Raider movie in forever,
Mhm.
but I remember no supernatural occurrences. I just remember, like, maybe that she got, like, a feeling, like, the spidey sense, but I didn't remember, like, any supernatural aspects. So whenever I was watching the clips and stuff to catch up and, like, recap, I
Mhm.
was like, "Wait, what?
Mhm.
Girly what?
Mhm.
Like, the mummy who?"
So in the first game, she fights a
So,
entire
oh
dinosaur,
lord.
T-Rex. So it goes there for
That's
some reason.
insane.
It's insane. Fighting T-Rexes and stuff. In one game, she fights a dragon, a whole bunch of stuff. So I find it hilarious that I really think Lara Croft is, especially as we go on with her character, she's Batman, but just with guns, and she like does it for fun. She's not doing it to defeat people. They're just like in her way, and they're like an annoyance to her. So I find that hilarious, which makes her interesting because it's like, is she a hero? Is she not a hero? Or is she just like this archaeologist trying to do her thing and people just get in her way?
No, I agree, I agree.
So the game was a critical and commercial success, topping the British charts 3 times and contributed highly to the success of the PlayStation console. It sold over 7 million copies worldwide and was the ninth best selling console game in the US, and also won several Game of the Year awards during that time. Of course, after all of this success, what do you think they did, Sabrina, after all the success of the first game?
Ruined it. No, I'm kidding. Made a second game.
Yes. So the sequel came out the next year. It had larger locations and human enemies, more powerful weapons, and was more of an action game, with the maze like structure of the last game becoming more streamlined and action oriented. So Toby Gard was also upset that idols transformed her into a sexually exploited asset. Not my words, that's somebody else's, but I found it funny. In several promotional materials, such as magazines and commercials, she was depicted in sexual ways that Guard didn't originally intend for the character. He didn't want her to be a sex object. They even tried to get him to create a code that would make her nude, and he refused, of course. Her over sexualization, due to her extreme popularity, though, was now entangled with the character, and Guard walked away from the franchise along with designer Paul Douglas. So I want to ask you this question. Do you think female characters such as Lara Croft can be both sexualized and powerful? And does that add to or take away from her character? What do you think?
So, I definitely think, like, power and, like, sex appeal can coexist. However, I don't think someone especially, like, a female character, has to be sexy in order to be powerful.
Mm,
And I feel like often they're paired together, especially in circumstances like these when they're like a video game.
mhm,
And like for a long time, video games were definitely heavily marketed towards young like men or boys and like kids and whatnot. And so that's what Laura Croft was. Like obviously she was a beautiful woman. So by giving her just quote unquote a little more sex appeal would just make her sell a little better. So I'll say that it sells. Like it's messed up, but that kind of media sells. So it's obvious that a company would want to do that. But in my perspective, it does like every now and then I'm like, man, that's a little scummy. I see
mhm,
what you're doing. And I'll be honest, I'm guilty of that sometimes. Sometimes I'll see an attractive person in a video game and I'm like, "Ooh, I need to play that game." Or it's a show, it's, "Ooh, that's a good-looking actor, actress, person. Let me go watch that." But I feel like I understand why the original, like, creator walked away because for him, in a sense, yeah, obviously the initial female model may have had, like, physique, but for him, he was creating this character, and in a sense, it was like his child, if you will. As artists, our creations are our babies, if you will. And I guess for him, like the idea that they wanted to like, in a sense, exploit his baby, like to change her in a way that may have not had the most like pure intentions. Like I understand why it soured his like feelings and he felt the need to walk away because he didn't want to be a part of that.
mhm.
Sorry, I got off the topic of your question. I definitely think they can coexist. I stan a powerful woman in any sense of the word. But I do think that there's a bit of I don't know, I feel like just because somebody is, like, sexy doesn't mean that they're powerful. It doesn't mean, like, they don't always hit, if you will. I don't know. Like, you can't get by on looks alone. Like, it's part of Laura, yes, it's her appeal, she's beautiful, but I think the other part is, like, her willingness to take action in these games. Like, the idea that she's, like, this dual pistol wielding, like, woman going through all these trials and tribulations, and I feel yeah, like, obviously, it's for its time, it's how they were able to keep sales and keep the game afloat, so you could see it as, like, that stepping stone that maybe needed to happen for this game to continue to where it is today, but I still think that even if they hadn't done it, which technically they didn't, I think wasn't it, like, fans that eventually inputted that kind of code anyway
Yeah,
to remove clothes and do stuff like that?
fans eventually put the code in,
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
they got upset and they were like, they tried to get it taken down. So it's weird. It's a weird story.
So, it's one of those things where it's at this point, especially, like, in our current time, like, technology, AI, like, people, like, become super hackers when they want something. Their
Right.
own FBI agents, CIA agents. So, it was bound to happen regardless, but I understand, like, the how, like, people can be like, "Oh, why has it gotta be sexy? Like, why can't we just have, um, pardon my French, a badass woman? Why can't we
Well, but
have
that's my
this
question.
amazing"
This question for me is, what do people consider sexy? Because I feel like when people consider sexy, they mean somebody with cleavage or who has less clothes. But I don't think that natural
Yeah.
those are attributes that naturally mean sexiness. They can probably enhance that. But I think sexiness could be more like of an attitude to me. Because usually when I look at characters, I'm not looking at what they're wearing or what they're not wearing or what they're lack of wearing. I think the sexiness really comes from, like, the attitude and how they present themselves, you know what I mean? I feel like you can be a sexy character and have less clothes, but you can also be a sexy character and have more clothes, you know what I mean? Sexiness isn't just about
I
what you
guess
wear, how you present yourself, but that's just how I look at it. That's always how I looked at it.
you're right. No, I definitely agree. Like, when you say that, I can think of a character or 2 where I'm like, "Dang, like, that person that was, like, a sexy performance." Prime example, Mads Mikkelsen in what's the word? Hannibal. He plays this very classy, like, straight to the point, like, a very sexy role, like, a very refined man, like a killer, like he's Hannibal. But at this it's not like anything about him like that's like you said, it's not like he's underdressed, it's not like there's any scenes where it provides, like, any kind of inappropriate connotation. I was saying, he just has that aura, like, he's very like, just the presence, like you're referring to. I don't know. I guess that's my argument is in the case of where it's not done tastefully. There's just a
Yeah.
very, like, a good way to go about something, and then there's a way that's, "Man, that was cheap."
The difference between the first game and the second game is that the entire game making process of the second game was extremely taxing due to it taking 6 to 8 months to complete. It was like an overly long crunch period. We have to remember that the first Tomb Raider game took years to complete. The second one only took a few months. And so, while it was originally planned to release on PlayStation, Windows, and Sega Saturn, which were the same platforms that it was originally released on in the first game, the Saturn version was officially canceled due to technical limitations. So Lara herself received a makeover with the amount of polygons for her character model being increased, a free-flowing braid slash ponytail like she had in the cutscenes in the art of the original game, and more realistic curves to her design, while also giving her more outfits for different levels. So in the original game, Gar didn't want to give Lara human enemies. There were a few in the original, but Tomb Raider 2 put a greater emphasis on action, including armed human enemies, along with a greater variety of animals and supernatural enemies. They still made sure to put a focus on the exploration and puzzle solving, though. 2 featured more environments and outdoor levels, a sky wall which looked more realistic, a bigger mansion filled with secrets, vehicles, and zip lines. Judith Gibbons took over the role of Lara Croft from the original voice actress Shelley Blond. So the game follows Laura as she hunts for the magical dagger of Zion, which is also hunted by the Italian cult Fiamma Detta. By plunging the weapon in one's heart, it turns the bear into a dragon. Lara travels to the Great Wall of China and runs into a cultist who kills himself after revealing his master Marco Bartoli is seeking the dagger. She tracks the cult, travels to Venice, and stows away on Marco's plane, overhearing him speaking of the seraph which is needed to retrieve said dagger. Lara is found and imprisoned in an oil rig above the ship. When she escapes, she runs into a monk of the Barkane Monastery in Tibet, who originally defeated the emperor and sealed the dagger away. They were there to prevent Marco from retrieving the seraph, but get killed in the process. The story continues with Lara searching a shipwreck and finding the seraph, eventually heading to Tibet, which is now in control of the cult. Lara uses the seraph to retrieve the key to the dagger, killing the guardian and unlocking the dagger's chamber, but then plunged into the catacombs before she could reach it. Marco is able to stab himself with the dagger and travels through a portal that she follows him through. Marco Bertoli, now a dragon, battles Lara until she knocks him unconscious and removes the dagger from his heart. She escapes to the real world as the area collapses and returns home, which leads the cultists to try one final attack at her manor. It is unsuccessful, but it is very iconic. The final scene in the video game is Laura about to disrobe for a shower, but then shooting the player's camera, breaking the fourth wall, and ending the game. Whew, sis be going through it. Cause like, why? What is this? All that? Nope.
I know, you said dragon, and I was like, "What?"
Yeah. A constant theme with Lara and like the characters in her games are that she will kill you. Like you're gonna die if you're like her enemy eventually. Not even if it's on purpose. I'm not saying like Laura's a cold blooded killer, but she must be because she like shoots up people all the time. But they're cold blooded killers too. So I just find that
Mhm,
funny.
mhm.
And also this second game also introduced like this element of Winston the butler. He was in the first game. I think he was in the first game. I don't remember. I think he was. But in the second game, he follows you around all throughout the manor, and there's this iconic thing that you can do in the game. Can you guess what that thing is with the butler?
Oh my.
Guess something out there, and let's see if you're right.
I was gonna say, like, something he does or something you ask of him?
Something that you do to him.
Oh, you could shoot him.
Okay, so maybe, but it doesn't affect him. But what you can do is lock
No.
him in a freezer. So Lara Croft has
What?
this big freezer that you can open up, and Winston follows you all throughout the manor. If you can get him to get in the freezer and you flip out of the freezer and then press the button to close the freezer, you will end up locking him in there. And if you open it again, he's this giant ice cube, and then eventually he thaws out and comes back and follows you there. But it's a very iconic Tomb Raider 2 thing where you can just lock him in a freezer. Yeah. I would love to see your face if you're shocked right now or something, but that's a that's a very video game thing to do.
I'm just like, "What? My man."
Yeah, fans love to do it. We love to lock Winston in a freezer. We still love him though. He's a great butler, but every now and then, all the grunting and all the because he's slow, he be like, "Ooh," that's the noises that he makes, and so sometimes you need to lock him up. I'm not in
Sometimes you just
favor,
need to lock him up.
but yeah,
That's messed up.
yeah, I'm not in favor of it. Every now and then, you gotta do what you gotta do and lock him in a freezer. It's better than what like people do in The Sims or whatever, the crazy stuff that people do in there, but this ain't The Sims. This is Lara Croft, the archaeologist who mistreats her workers in Butler. So I don't know what to tell you. Okay. The third game was planned to be released the next year again, but they wanted 2 years to work due to the burnout and next generation of consoles coming. So Eidos split the work, having a new team work on 3 and an old team working on the next big thing. Tomb Raider 3 had better graphics and was a more cinematic experience with a supernatural tone and featured less tombs, but the ability to choose the order of locations that you want to go to in the video game. It placed a greater emphasis on puzzle solving and adult tones, with the storyline being amped up. Locations in this game include India, the South Pacific, London, Nevada, and Antarctica. So the story follows Laura as she recovers 4 pieces of a meteorite that are scattered across the world. She works with the RX tech scientist Dr. Willard and I thought his name was about to say something else. She works with the RX tech scientist Dr. Willard and agrees to help him find the pieces, only to discover after collecting them all and defeating a host of villains that the doctor has been using the knowledge gained from the meteorite to perform experiments and mutate his men. After Laura expresses her opposition,
Mhm.
he betrays her, steals the artifacts and a meteorite, and uses them to speed up the evolution of the human body, turning himself into a spider-like creature. Of course, Laura deactivates the meteorite by recovering the artifacts, defeats the mutated Willard, and escapes again, this time by helicopter. So do you see how every time the new game comes, it's just amped up with this weird supernatural stuff? Like, he mutates his own man, turns into a giant spider creature. Like, it's already it was like 100, but then they bring it to 150. It's ridiculous. It's great though, because it's good, but it's ridiculous. Okay. Reviews for the game were positive overall. By this point, there was a new game every year, and despite newer features being added with every release, they felt more or less the same. The team was tired, and to give you a bit of context, Idols acquired Core Design in 1996, right? And they were named
Mhm.
the fastest growing company in the world in the 1998 World Economic Forum. So, like, how did you grow that fast? By doing all that crunch and overworking your workers. That's ridiculous. In just 2 years time. Oh my gosh. The designers at Core, fed up, had a secret plan to kill off Laura in her 4th game, while also listening to fan feedback and putting the tomb back in Tomb Raider. They also introduced characters that played a bigger role in the story. The game was called Tomb Raider: The Last Revelation. Her model was more defined. The levels took place entirely in Egypt, but because of that, mostly everything looked the same. But they also were now a bit more open ended, with some areas having to be revisited. She even had a running train sequence, which was pretty cool. And by this time, she received another voice change, now being voiced by Janelle Elliott. The game starts with a flashback to teenage Laura in 1984 as she and her mentor and renowned archaeologist Werner von Croy explore the Angkor Wat in search of the artifact called the Iris. Von Croy, for those of you who don't know, is the man who triggered Laura's interest in archaeology in the first place. During her teenage years, she convinced her parents to allow her to join him on expeditions, and he happily took her under his wing due to her making a strong impression on him in one of his lectures. During their search for the Iris, he challenges Laura to a race where the winner would claim the relic. Lara deciphers a tablet stating that removing the Iris would be dangerous, but Von Croy is in a haste, triggers a trap, and forces Laura to escape without him. So Sis just leaves him there in that pyramid. But teenagers, what can you do? Back in the present day, Lara is now in Egypt with her guide exploring the tomb of Set, aka the god of chaos, where she finds the amulet of Horus, but is betrayed by the said guide due to him working for her former mentor, Von Croy, who is revealed to be alive. It is revealed that Lara's actions have released Set, leading her on a race against time to stop the god who has now possessed her former mentor. Eventually, after tons of tomb raiding, Lara ends up beneath the Great Pyramid of Giza and defeats Set. She joins the newly unpossessed Von Croy, but is injured and ends up hanging from a ledge. Von Croy tries to help her, but unsure about whether he is truly himself or not, she doesn't take his hand, forcing Von Croy to run away as the temple collapses all around Lara. What do you think about that, Sabrina? What do you think about them killing off Lara Croft in the fourth game?
Oh, okay. So in a as like a player, obviously it's oh dang. Like all this work and then my girl dies. But as I guess an artist and as like somebody who's like very pro creator, I'm like, get her, fight for yourself, do what is right for you and your people who are suffering, being treated like little labor slaves, being forced to pump out this game in unreasonable turnaround times. And I'll admit it, I'm a last minute kind of person. I work somewhat decently under pressure pulling stuff from my butt at the last second. But like those poor developers being forced to like the deadlines just got worse and worse. And it's one thing if you have this crunch timeline and then like you get a break, like maybe it's like you work consistently for months and then maybe your team gets like a vacation for a month or two. You get reprieve from all this work. But the company was basically like, "Nah, get back in your chairs. Get back to work." Like, "What you mean? We got another game coming out a couple months from now.
And
Go play." And of course, I'm sure, no offense, if I was working like that, I would be half dead. Like, the mental health, the morale in that office or, like, studio where they're working is probably terrible. They all probably smell. They're all probably miserable, hating their jobs. How are you supposed to create a good game acting like that?
I don't know, ask
And then,
Adam.
of course, could you imagine if that was us? Could you imagine just dying like that? My little hand would
No.
fall off, my wrist, done. I already
What
got back problems, like, get soreness, like, I would be decimated. Done. Send me off to the mill, replace me, take me out to pasture.
so Adam's
Like,
they
could
didn't even
not,
have an idea.
could not.
They oh my god. They had no idea that they killed Lara off though. Did you know that?
Yeah, the actual company didn't know, but the developers
Mhm.
did.
Developers did. They had
But
no
yeah, they
idea,
deserved it.
but they also had no intention of stopping the milk train because they still made them make another game anyway once they found out.
That's so fucking frustrating.
So to get around the death of Lara in the next game in Tomb Raider Chronicles, they did the game as a series of segments telling different adventures, which eventually led to the reveal that Lara might still be alive. Three of Lara's friends and associates, her butler Winston, who we love to lock in a freezer. I bet you that he's at least glad that, that doesn't happen anymore. The family priest, Father Patrick Dunstan, and Lara's history teacher, Charles Kane, reminisce over some of her earlier exploits. The first one follows her quest in Rome to find a philosopher's stone. It features the return of Larson Conway and Pierre Dupont, who I must say are a hilarious duo. The second story follows her looking for the Spear of Destiny, while the third story follows a teenage Lara as she follows Father Patrick Dunstan to an island haunted by demonic forces. The fourth and final story, though, follows Lara as she infiltrates the New York corporate headquarters of Von Croy to retrieve the iris, which separated the two in the beginning of the last game. This story also introduces my favorite Tomb Raider character, side character, I should say, Zip, who returns in future games and who will return in a Netflix animated series set to release later this year at the time of this recording. The game ends with Von Croy digging through the rubble of the Great Pyramid and declaring that they have found Lara because he sees her backpack in the rubble.
Dude, I'd be mad. My little hand would crunch out the okay, so when I saw that clip, all I could think of was her little arm shooting out and grabbing his little wrist. Cause no offense, I'm like when I get a bag, it's my bag. If it's my little crossbody, like whatever, It's my bag. I'm the bag friend. So the fact if somebody touched my bag, I would revive from the dead. I was like, just for that one moment to be like, do not like I'm gonna be when I die, I'm gonna be like a mummy. I'm gonna be like one of the Egyptian pharaohs. You're gonna bury all my stuff with me. Maybe
Oh
not
my
everything. I don't need everything. But I want my bag. I'm gonna want my pack of Mike and Ikes, maybe like a bottle of water. You never know what happens after life. Like
well,
like they just
no.
lower you
Well, if you
down.
die, just hunt a store and get the Mike and Nikes for free. You don't need somebody to just go and put them in there. Get them for free
Oh, well, f
anytime you
dude,
want.
if I but I always make the joke that if my house is haunted, that ghost better be paying rent, and I don't like, somebody's gonna pull that on me. Karma's gonna come back, and it'd be like, "You always joke that every time something fell and that something happened, that, the ghost better be paying rent." Somebody's gonna do that to me, and I don't want that to happen. I want all that stuff there. I just wanna be able to lay down and relax. Put me in a spot with Wi-Fi, please. Or
Alright.
just leave my phone in there. Delete my browser history. That's all I can ask. Anyway,
I ain't
back
gonna
to the story.
gonna
My girl Laura gets
yes,
her
leave it at
bag
there. Okay,
yanked.
so Idle Still Milking the Cow accelerated the next game's release to coincide with the 2001 Tomb Raider Cradle of Life. Tomb Raider Angels of Darkness was widely panned, almost killed the franchise, and resulted in Idle's stripping core of the Tomb Raider rights forever. The game follows Lara as she attempts to clear herself of being the suspect of her former mentor Werner von Croy's murder while investigating the activities of a black magic cult known as the Cabal. She is later joined by a playable male character and love interest, Curtis Trent. There were plans to use him more past this game, but they never panned out. Although the game featured next-gen graphics, new stealth abilities, stamina meter, and even player choice, all of these elements were underbaked and not planned out correctly. It didn't help that Idols pushed for the game's release to coincide with the 2001 film starring Angelina Jolie. There were lots of people with headphones on, just all working on their things, but I don't know why this. Let me just say this before I read this quote. I don't know why this quote is so unfinished. I don't know if I just typed it as unfinished or if I copied and pasted as unfinished, but I'm just gonna like wing it a bit, okay? Because I don't know what happened there. There were lots of people with headphones on, just all working on their things. But then one disaster after another happened as they realized things didn't tally up. Gavin Rummery. This led to the next game rebooting the franchise and being given to a new company altogether. Wow. What do you think this so if we call the first timeline of Tomb Raider the original timeline, what do you think the second timeline would be called? Just a guess, just a guess.
Wait, so what was the first Tomb Raider timeline called?
I just called the original timeline.
The original timeline?
Mhm.
I don't know. Lara Croft revived? I don't know. Like, regeneration, remaster, refresh?
Mhm.
What's the word? Uno reverse? Oh, you thought she was dead. Not I don't know. Tomb Raider 2?
Tomb Raiders. I knew you were gonna give me a whole bunch of horrible answers. That's why I asked you that impossible question. We call it the Legend timeline after the first game of this timeline, Tomb Raider
Oh.
Legend in 2006.
Okay.
Part 2, The Legend Timeline. So,
Makes sense.
get ready for this because I want to ask you a question about this. Lara's story was changed to being the daughter of archaeologist Lord Richard Croft, the Earl of Abingdon, and someone who was quickly identified as a highly talented individual while attending the Abingdon Girls' School. The plane crash that led her to be an archaeologist in the original timeline was changed to when Lara was 9 years old and with her mother, Amelia Croft. While searching for shelter, Lara and her mother took refuge in an ancient Nepalese temple, where Lara witnesses her mother vanish after tampering with an ancient sword. Her father later disappears in search of his wife, and this spurs Lara on to seek the reason for her mother's disappearance. You know why I said Lara's like Batman besides the original timeline? So the Legend timeline gives her a little bit of a Batman origin story with the parents. What do you think about Laura's origin story being someone who chose the Tomb Raider life because that's what she loved, to while she still loved the archaeologist life, she did it more so because of her parents? What do you think about that and that trajectory for her character?
Okay, so this kinda brings up because I made that comment where it was like being maybe somebody with the privilege to make the choice to have this be her path versus someone who maybe didn't so much have the choice but needed to do it as like a means of survival. So that definitely I feel like it offers,
Still
although it
rich,
probably
though. She's
didn't
still
have it.
rich. Let's not forget
Yeah,
that.
man, that must be nice. Wish. No, I think it obviously definitely changes the circumstances of her experience, and like you said, in the first series, she's very much more of that Batman character, like, she even has her butler in her mansion, but I feel like the second one might allow her to maybe it allows her a little bit more connection with other people maybe in the field rather than being a lone wolf, which I believe don't we see that in some of the upcoming games? She starts to get, like, a team,
Yes.
which I personally, like, enjoy that kind of setup a little more than necessarily being a lone ranger. Prime example of one of my favorite games as a kid was Sly Cooper,
Mhm.
that franchise, and in the second game, when it was like you had all the pieces of your puzzle, if you will, that kind of made up the whole picture versus it just being, like, maybe, like, the solo main character on that mission, from my playstyle perspective, I enjoy more. So I feel like maybe this path, although a little more laden in responsibility, to a sense of, like, connections with other people and, like, that connection to, like, her parents versus them being, like, completely almost separate from that experience, I find it a little more, like, appealing. But maybe that's just because I know where it's going. Obviously, this is the past. If it was fresh off the shelf and I went to go play, I probably may not experience the difference as much.
Mhm.
But having it now and looking at the history of these games, knowing what it leads to, I probably would be like, "Oh, yes, I like this trajectory more." But, in this timeline so far, she'll die, so that's
Well,
also
I
why.
mean, she came back to life in the other one, so she
Yeah.
but I feel I like okay, so it's weird because I like, her parents probably being archaeologists a little bit, but I also like that she chose to be an archaeologist too, and I think
Yeah.
that this new timeline kinda removes that agency a little bit, because while it, like, grounds her a bit more, it does make it seem like less of her choice and some more something that she probably had to do, right? Even though she loves
Mhm.
it, like, that's never questioned. I do feel like it's nothing that she grew a love of on her own. She grew a love of it because she was introduced to it, like, by her parents, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And she's following their footsteps. And also, I think that every game after this, the parent storyline, eventually you gotta get over the parent story not get over your parents, but get over the parent storyline because they lean into that a lot, and sometimes it's tiring because it's like, "Lord, don't you have anything else going on in your past besides your parents, like, dying and disappearing? Can we solve this mystery so you can finally be free and just start raiding tombs?" Because I think eventually you gotta not get over it. Like, don't get you know what I'm trying to say, not get over your parents' deaths, you know what I'm trying to say, but don't let that be your only defining thing as a character, and I think sometimes writers lean on that crutch a little bit too much with her character, but that's just me. You know what I mean? I like both though, because I like that she has that backstory. I do also like that her parents kicked her out and were like, "We don't want you anymore because you decide to go and raid dangerous tombs for no reason at all, just because you're excited." You know what I mean? So I don't know how I feel about it really. I do know though that I feel like they rely too heavily on the parent aspect. But I also like a Lara Croft that is also surrounded by friends, but also again, not too much. To me, Lara Croft is someone who is a bit of a loner, so she likes to do things by herself, but she doesn't look at help as something that turns her off. She'll receive it and she'll appreciate it, but for the most part, she likes to do things on her own, you know what I mean? So she'll have a friend every now and then help her with this, but she really just likes to do that stuff for herself too. So I like that type of Lara Croft. But with the Legend games, they do introduce a wider world of characters that I feel like the other games should have. Because with this game, when they wanted to give her like a support team of Zip, Alistair, and Winston, they were looking at past games and they realized that all of Laura's supporting cast were practically dead. So they had to make up like a new character to join the trio, and they brought in Zip because he was literally the only one that wasn't dead. I think that's very interesting too.
Dang. Which friend you bringing with you? The only one that's not dead.
Yeah. And I
Like,
love Zip, obviously. I love Zip so much because he was black and attractive. And so, because I really didn't know nothing about him. So I was like, "You're black and attractive. Let's go." And that's really it, and that's why I'm excited to see his character, to see his black guy in the animation too, to see where they take his character, and hopefully he's a fully well-developed character, because I grew up playing Tomb Raider, Underworld, and Legend. Those were my first Tomb Raider games outside the Game Boy Color games, so seeing Zip come back just makes me really excited, so it's really cool. It was cool seeing, like, this black attractive nerd on my video game screen. So, let's get into the changes that they made with Tomb Raider Legend. So, Eidos gave the series to a studio called Crystal Dynamics, with Toby Gard, the creator of the character, returning for character design, co-writing the story, and a movement system which reintroduced the grappling hook, which he was forced to give up when they first started working on the franchise due to it being too much like Indiana Jones. By this time, Lara Croft is an iconic character in her own right. Nowadays, when you say Lara Croft, you don't really think about Indiana Jones. You might think like she might be inspired by him, but she really is just like a character in her own right. When I think Lara Croft, I think of dual pistols. Indiana Jones doesn't never come in my head. So I think that it was cool that she finally got a few weapons that she could use that wouldn't make her look like a different character. So I think that's a well rewarded thing for a character. So the game had beautiful next gen graphics, competent controls, melee attacks, targeted shooting, and slow motion. New combat systems were implemented, but were much more arcadey, but they were still fun. And she had less weapons, but it worked. And it also reintroduced Croft Manor as an explorable area full of secrets. This is the first time since Tomb Raider 3 that they were able to do that. And of course, that she also had a new support team of Zip, Alistair, and her returning butler, Winston, who you did not lock in a freezer this time. So that's pretty cool. Tomb Raider Legend, though, serves as a first of a three-story arc within the game series, okay? So the game follows Laura on the quest for the mystical sword Excalibur, racing across the world against her former friend and classmate Amanda Everett, who was presumably dead after an archaeological accident that killed almost all of Laura's classmates, besides her and like another student who was another black character. So it was cool seeing a black man and black woman in the game. Cool. Compared to previous titles, the game is extremely cinematic, starting with a flashback of a plane crash with Lara and her mother Amelia in the Himalayas, leading to an artifact apparently killing her mother. In this timeline, Lara grows up to go on archaeological expeditions with her father Richard before his disappearance when she was 16. She then becomes a famous archaeologist in her own right, driven to understand the true fate of her parents. This game takes the player to a variety of locations such as Bolivia, Peru, Tokyo, Ghana, and more, and provides more of a supporting cast for Laura. It focuses more on the socialite angle of Laura as she interacts more with other characters who don't all die by the end of the game. She has dynamic exchanges with Zip and Alistair throughout the entire game, but is also joined by a host of new side characters, such as her old friend Anaya Imanu, investigative journalist Toru Nishimura, and Yakuza boss Shogo Takamoto. And along with her former friend turned antagonist Amanda, James Rutland joins in for the ride as he consistently flirts and battles her. She's like a funnier version of Batman, especially in the Legend timeline, with the capability and loner aspects of him, but without the need to like have a secret identity. So she's like, I'm rich, I rate tombs, I fight people. So what? Come after me, I'll blow you up. And of course, also she carries guns. Batman doesn't have he has a no killing rule, as we all know. But overall,
Batman doesn't have the gall.
yeah, he doesn't have the gall. He doesn't want to kill anyone. Overall, though, it's my favorite Tomb Raider game, and it reworks a lot of Lara's character while also keeping the elements of her background that makes her the iconic character that she is. She also loses her iconic braid in service of a ponytail this time, and she's voiced by my favorite Lara Croft voice actress, Keely Hawes. I just love her. The Idol staff describe her as having the right balance of aristocracy and attitude to really bring the character to life, and I agree. Some people say she sounds like somebody's mother, and I don't hear that at all. She does sound like an aristocrat, and her voice is more mature, but whenever I hear her voice, I never hear that's somebody's mother. Come here, darling. Let me. I'm not gonna do it because I'll mess it up. I'm gonna sit up right there. But I don't hear like. But this is my favorite Lara Croft. She's great, and she's the one who returns the most. She even returned most recently for the Tomb Raider Call of Duty crossover that they did last year, and she came back to voice her for that too. She voiced her on a lot of games, and I love her so much. So, the game ends with Lara using the Sword of Avalon and realizing that it created a time rift that brings her back to the moments of her mother's death. In the beginning of the game, like I said, we see Lara's mother talking to someone through a portal, and that person is revealed to be Lara herself. The portal eventually explodes, leading to her mother's apparent death. Lara, enraged, shoots at Amanda several times until she reveals that her mother was transported to Avalon, leading Lara to knock her out as she sets out on a quest to find her mother. Woo. That scene was iconic. You need to if nobody ever seen that scene, it's literally her shooting at her next to her face several times, being like, "Where is my mother?" Oh, I love this so much. Such a good iconic scene. Oh, it showed like Lara Croft being enraged, which we don't see very much because she's usually like calm, cool, and collected and sarcastic.
Yeah, I was about
But
to
here,
say.
yeah, she was ready to take her out. She was about to kill her. Like she wasn't playing.
She was like, "Try me,
Mhm,
witch."
but would it be right?
Yeah. I was trying to be friendly. I already cursed once, I used my 1.
Yeah, don't come on cursing on my podcast. What's the matter with you?
I'm sorry, it just slips
No,
out of
that. So for the next game, Core Design worked on a Tomb Raider Anniversary Edition, and studio manager Gavin Rummery pitched a remake to Idols. It was accepted, but Crystal Dynamics got in the way and created their own version of the game, effectively canceling the Core Design version. That was the last Tomb Raider project they ever worked on, and it was
Dang.
unfinished. So, Anniversary was a reimagined version of the first game, and they worked it into the larger three-game story arc between Legend and the next game. Lara also went to extreme lengths in this game to not kill humans, and the game focused on the impact that it had on her when she eventually did. God wanted to present Laura as someone whose initial drive for adventure was like a sort of unstoppable madness contained within a proper British woman. He wanted to see how far she was willing to go and what moral boundaries she would cross in pursuit of said goals, and used characters from the original timeline, such as Larson, as a way to give her chemistry with other human beings, giving her an emotional scene with him, which led to his death. She wasn't just cold or aloof anymore, but someone who showed humanity and vulnerability, all while covering it with her tough exterior. That's what I like about this timeline's Laura. She's very tough, but she also shows emotion. I watched Legend in the game, and they do have those emotional moments. They didn't quite hit as much as I would like them to, mostly because the game is not a very long game at all. Legend was a short game, but Anniversary was a bit longer than that because they expanded on the story a bit. But it was like an action movie type of thing, very puzzle focused and things like that. But I wish they would have focused a bit more on those emotional elements, just a little bit. But that's why it's a 3-game arc, right? So it goes there. What I wish is they focus more on her, like, having her first kill when she first kills a human being and how that affected her, because when she does it, after that, she feels some things, but then after that, she really don't care, is what I'm trying to get to.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I wish I would've saw more of that, but it is cool to see that game being remade in a new context, and I really do think that's one of the best ways to play the original game, that and the new remastered version that just came out. But going on to the next game after that is Tomb Raider Underworld, which is one of my favorites, and it has so many things. It kept her afloat. Okay, so by Tomb Raider Underworld's time, that's when we finally got introduced to Nathan Drake. Do you know who Nathan Drake is, Sabrina?
No.
Nathan Drake is the protagonist of the Uncharted games.
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah.
Nathan Drake came in as this sort of rival to Lara Croft because now he was coming into the picture, creating these sort of games that were inspired by the Tomb Raider games, and he was starting to gain traction as a character. And so when Tomb Raider Underworld came out, it kept her afloat in a way that kept her still being able to fight against him hand to hand. You know what I mean? Because this was this new
Yeah.
rival from this video game franchise that was coming out, and this okay, how can we keep Laura relevant in a sort of way? So It introduced one of my favorite aspects with the dual pistols in this game by giving them the ability to target up to 2 enemies at once. Can you believe that every game before this never had that ability? With the dual pistols, you can only target 1 enemy, but now with this game, you can do 2. Like, I was surprised with that when I went and played the other games. I was like, "Wait a second, I can only shoot, like, 1 enemy at a time with these dual pistols?" So that's very interesting. So, no more just shooting 1 enemy with 2 guns. It was developed on an entirely separate game engine and felt more like an action movie. It also featured more open areas and smoother and more realistic animation. So in Underworld, Lara searches for the legendary Mjolnir, which would allow her to enter the realm of Helheim, while also facing Amanda, Natla, and a new enemy, the evil doppelganger of Laura herself. On this journey, she loses one of her allies in Alistair as he is killed when a doppelganger of Laura breaks into Croft Manor, shoots him, and bombs the mansion. She came in to
Dang.
start chaos, and she did not disappoint. Lara also gains the mystical powers of Mjolnir and learns what truly happened to her parents. The game ends with Lara and Amanda allying together against Natla in order to stop her from activating an ancient device that will trigger apocalyptic volcanic activity. It is in this game that we discover that Lara's mother, Amelia, was trapped in Helheim and turned into a thrall, which is a slave, like it's like the zombie slave like sort of creature. And then Natla killed her father after he betrayed her in Thailand years ago. They are also able to defeat Natla and the doppelganger and prevent a worldwide apocalypse. Lara is finally able to bid her mother goodbye in a very sad note. How do you feel about that? Like her looking for her parents and discovering like, yeah, they were dead all along, but like in a like worst ways possible.
I think it sucks. If it were me, obviously, I'd be mad. But I feel like it was their way of doing, like, a plot twist, if you will. Like, obviously, it's that point where it's like the hero reaches the end of their journey, but was the journey really worth it? Like, when,
Mm,
like, you find out the truth behind what you're looking for.
yeah.
And so I enjoyed it. Like, maybe not, like, the best delivery. Maybe we could have had a little I'm sure, like, watching the gameplay, it's a little more cinematic in a sense, like, it's a little more, like, cohesive, but, like, just saying it, like, as we were now, like, "Man, turns out this is what happened."
Mhm.
It's a little not the flair that Laura deserved, but I don't think it's bad. I don't know that I would've changed it. I like those kinds of plot twists where it's, not every ending is gonna be happy, and I like that. And obviously, like you said, this is, like, part of a trilogy, so it offers, like, I guess what would be, like, the start of the next game of, like, where does Laura go from here? Is she gonna pull herself up by her bootstraps and keep going, or is this, like, the end of Lara Croft?
It keeps going, I'll tell you that, because this
Yeah.
game features 2 DLC episodes, so Beneath the Ashes and Lara's Shadow, that are set after the events of the game. In the DLC episodes, the doppelganger is revealed to have survived and finds a disfigured Natla who uses the magic command, which I will not say here because I don't know how to say that, which causes her to take Natla to her place of birth in an ancient ruin. When she restores the ruin's healing technology, she orders the doppelganger to kill Lara. Meanwhile, Lara is at Croft Manor and finds notes of a thrall creating stone carved with the same command used on the doppelganger. After a thrall appears and attacks her, Lara goes deeper into the catacombs and finds the stone. The doppelganger then appears and attacks Lara, but she uses the phrase and brings her under her control. After asking questions of the doppelganger's nature, she states that she and Lara are driven by something beyond their control. For the doppelganger, it is the compulsion, and for Lara, it is obsession. Lara frees the doppelganger from all commands and sends it back to Natla in order to get revenge for Alistair's death. The doppelganger travels back to the ruins, destroys the healing device that Natla is in, and leaves Natla to drown in a rising pool of the same substance that created the undead thralls who are the guardians of Thor's relics. So that's the end of Natla. But I want to ask you a question about Lara as a character. They say that her drive and her compulsion is one of obsession. What do you think that means for Lara? What do you think makes her so obsessed with like tomb raiding and archaeology?
Okay, so in the perspective of this new character who say did not choose to be a Tomb Raider, she felt pressured into the circumstance because it was her parents. I feel like it's this obsession of finding what like is yours that you've in a sense lost. So what maybe started as like being like, oh, like maybe I'll do this because my mom does this or so on and so forth became like this hunt, like this constant hunt for something just like outside of your grasp. Like in this case, her mom, like she's trying to find out what happened, what's going on, all these obstacles in her way, and what maybe started out as this need to survive, make an income, and fulfill like family obligation eventually became this obsession with finding like her
Do
parentage.
you think it was a family
Um,
obligation? Or do you think 'cause she could have chosen to do something else. Do you think she did it because she felt obligated to her family, or do you think that her family was just a driving force to help her continue going with the archaeology?
so I think initially it could have obviously it was probably like a mix of like passion and like, oh, this is what's that term? Not normalcy, but it's like comfort, like it's something that you're used to. So it's something that is almost like reliable in a sense that it's familiar. But I feel like after, like, in a sense, like, the drama happens, like, the whole point of our story plot, if you will, starts to emerge, I feel like it became an obligation.
Mm.
'Cause, like, the reality of it is, Kaiser, if, like, you were in her shoes and say it was your mom or, like, one of your sisters, like, something happened to them, they're gone, would you be able to stop being a tomb raider, an archaeologist? Like
If my family, like, were archaeologists? Me?
Like, if they were to, like, disappear,
Mhm.
like her mom did, and would you just be able to stop and move on with your life and go be whatever, like, you, like, decided your new dream was?
I don't know. I don't know.
In my perspective, like, I don't think I could. Like, because in the reality of it is that in my mind, because obviously these skills that she's learned from her family is what will help her find them. It's like this tomb raiding, like, solving these puzzles and mysteries and going against these people, which she has the strength to do. I feel like it comes from, like, a place of love, obviously, but there's also, like, that subtle sense of, like, man, they're your family, like, if you the one person who knows that you're capable of saving them and doing this,
Mm.
you feel like you're out of love and obviously responsibility, you're going to be the one to save.
So, what do you think keeps her going after the fact then? After she finds out what happens to her parents?
That's, I guess, the point of the next, like, game, it's that it becomes the big question, like, at that point, has this obsession to find, like, her family and continue finding these artifacts and going against, like, her enemies? Is that, like, ambition and that strength gonna continue to persevere, or is she gonna be broken by the discovery and then no longer be a Tomb Raider? Which, obviously, she doesn't break, she continues moving forward, we got another game. But I think that's where we see obsession, like, once you are watching your back for so long, I think it feels hard to stop, if you will. Once you're so used to looking over your shoulder of who can what's gonna happen when the next ball's gonna drop, the next stone rolling down the hill,
Mhm.
like, you're always gonna be,
Well,
like,
I guess my
waiting for
question is, do you
that
think she
scene.
loves tomb raiding? Do you think she loves it?
I think yes. I think, like, obviously, obsession cannot develop without an extreme emotion. And most of the time, obviously, these extreme emotions are usually are like love or hatred. Like it's either you love something to the point where like you're obsessed with it, like you want to be around it because it gives you like a certain feeling that you desire, or you completely hate it. Like you feel that negatively about it that it persists and it has to somehow become a part of your being. Just because like you're so like adamant in about the fact that you dislike this thing. And so, I definitely don't think she hates Tomb Raider. Like, it's obvious, like, she has the skill in it, it's something she's passionate about, she would not make it as far as she has, as successful as she is, without having passion, and I think she loves it, but if I were in her shoes, I'd definitely be tired.
Mm.
Like, after all that, I wouldn't be going to no other tomb, okay? I'd be like, "Yo, I need to go in my mansion, Wilfred, watch the door, don't let nobody in, turn
When
everybody
sh
away." I don't it don't matter if I'm
Yeah.
that rich. Alfred, Winston, Wilfred, I don't care.
Well,
It don't
Sabrina,
matter.
I have some news for you.
Yeah.
So, after Underworld, we did get a new game. It was called Lara Croft and the Guardian of Light. Square Enix now owned Eidos, and they split Crystal Dynamics into two teams. One focused more on re-engineering the franchise in order to compete with Uncharted, and the other focused more on something more arcadey. And that's the game that we got with this one. It needs to be graphically simple so it could run simultaneously on mobile platforms as well as consoles. It had to have a fun single player, but also support couch co op and feature exciting puzzles and gunplay in order to make sure that she was the queen of it all. And it also had to make sure that it will stay popular enough to be financially viable. It succeeded in all those areas, but like really, it was just like a side game, really, for Lara Croft and the Guardian of Light. The new game didn't come until the next reboot.
The next one.
The next reboot. This one was not just a reboot that kept the same Laura and then changed her past a little bit. No, this reboot changed everything. And it first started with an origin story. This was the Survivor timeline, which we'll tell you about after this trivia.
And we're back. Are you guys ready? Besides Lara Croft and the Guardian of Light, Lara Croft and the Temple of Osiris, the level editor, and the action adventure, how many Tomb Raider video games spin-offs are there? A. 18, B. 15, C. 13, or D. 21? And the answer is, drum roll please, B. 16. Whoa, that's a lot of spin-off games. Too many to announce here, but let's try anyway. Tomb Raider on the Game Boy Color, Tomb Raider Curse of the Sword, Tomb Raider The Prophecy, Tomb Raider Apocalypse Episode 1 The Eye of the Osiris, Tomb Raider The Osiris Codex, Tomb Raider Apocalypse Episode 2 The Shadow Falls, Tomb Raider Apocalypse Episode 3 The Last Midnight, Tomb Raider Quest for Cinnabar, Tomb Raider The Elixir of Life, Tomb Raider The Temple of Anubis, Tomb Raider Puzzle Paradox, Lara Croft Reflections, Lara Croft Relic Run, Lara Croft Go, and Tomb Raider Reloaded.
Wow.
That was a mouthful. And don't forget, if you got it right, let us know in a Q&A response on the Spotify app. See you later. Part 3, the Survivor timeline.
Okay, so the Survivor timeline. Sabrina, are you ready?
Oh, as ready as I'll ever be for this timeline.
The third era, established in Tomb Raider 2013, deviates from the original plot considerably. When Lara was young, she traveled with her parents on many of their archaeological expeditions, which helped to shape the woman that she was becoming. It was on one of these expeditions that her mother, Amelia Croft, vanished and was presumed dead, and when her father, Richard, presumably took his own life a few years later. She was then left in the care of Conrad Roft. Even though she inherited a vast fortune, giving her the means to attend Cambridge with ease, Laura chose to study at the University College of London. Though this was a much tougher choice, it helped her become more grounded and level-headed than she might otherwise have been. She also ended up meeting her best friend, Samantha Nishimura. It was because of Sam's free spirit and wild streak that Laura was able to experience much more than just the universities and museums that she loved so much. After traveling the world, both Laura and Sam end up on an expedition to the Dragon's Triangle off the Japanese coast in search of the lost civilization of Yamatai. It is on this expedition that Laura is stranded on a remote island full of natural, human, and supernatural dangers, which enables her to develop from an untested young woman to a survivor. After experiencing the supernatural powers of the ancient world, she comes to realize her father was right about his theories, and her hunger for adventure awakens. Although Laura had an independent life, including much international work, she was also able to maintain an active social life and healthy relationships. In the reboot, we follow a 21-year-old Lara. She is shipwrecked on an island off the coast of Japan, of course, called Yamatai, that bears resemblance to the Bermuda Triangle. It's controlled by a violent cult due to whoever entering being unable to escape. You either join the cult or you were slaughtered. And Lara isn't the battle-hardened and independent explorer that she is in the past games. She has to save her friends from the cult. but she has to go through a lot of different trials and tribulations to do so. Lara is beat up a lot, but she also beats up a lot of people. Guard returned to help by working as an external cinematics director, which including helping with story and script feedback, casting, motion capture direction, virtual camera operation, voiceover direction, and animation feedback, with Rihanna Pratchett serving as the primary writer for this game and its sequel, Rise of the Tomb Raider. She also gained the bow and arrow, which have become just as iconic as her iconic dual pistols. Now, I always want Laura to have her dual pistols, but I also always want her to have her bow and arrow. I need her to have both. In this newest trilogy, she always has the bow and arrow, but she does not have the dual pistols, which is interesting. This game had an open world and a great environmental design with optional tunes, although they were pretty short. And this is the series where she is voiced by the new voice actress, Camelia Luddington from Grey's Anatomy fame, who also does the motion capture for her character. The game has a very long plot, so I won't give the whole thing here, but as I said, we follow a 21-year-old Laura and her crew, Conrad, Sam, which is her bestie, Alex, the guy who has a crush on her, Jocelyn, the cool black woman. That's literally her role, to be a cool black woman. Literally. Jonah, one of the best characters in the series, Angus Randall, and Dr. James Whitman set out aboard the Endurance to find the lost kingdom of Yamatai. And at her suggestion, they venture into the Dragon's Triangle. The ship is struck by a violent storm and sinks, stranding them all on the island with no way to get out. Lara is able to locate most of the other survivors besides Roth and Sam, with the latter getting captured by a man named Matthias. Whitman and Lara end up getting captured by the islanders and are separated trying to escape. One of the men tries to sexually abuse and harass Lara, causing her to kill him in order to escape, which plays a very big part in her character arc because she's never killed someone before. The rest of the game follows Lara, but she kills a lot in this game after that. So the rest of the game follows Lara in a sprawling arc, trying to get off the island with her crew while rescuing her best friend Sam from the Solari who try to sacrifice her as a new host for their Sun Queen Himoko, with the help of Whitman, who betrays the crew. In the end, Laura, with the help of the rest of her crew, is able to defeat Himiko, but not without losing a few friends along the way. In the end, Laura, Sam, Reyes, and Jonah leave the island and are picked up by a cargo ship. And Laura decides that there are more myths left to uncover, that she's not returning home just yet. So I want to ask you a question, Sabrina.
Mhm.
Why do you think that so many of these adaptations, so two of them so far, put such an emphasis on Lara killing her human enemies for the first time? Why do you think they put such an emphasis on that?
Obviously, at least I don't remember, like, the specified age of the previous game that we discussed where it was, like, the very, like, emphasis of like, first emphasis of, like, human enemies
Mhm.
and the idea of taking human life. But I feel like in this newer game, it's almost, like, I guess, a coming of age, if you will. Like, the idea of taking a human life, like, separates what is, like, that in a sense, the purity of being, like, an innocent, like, someone who maybe is, like, a victim of circumstance, but, like, that first kill, like, is, like, this peak moment of where you have to choose if you're gonna survive and be willing to, I guess, step up to the plate, if you will. It sounds messed up to say it that way, but it's like a dog eat dog world sometimes. Like, sometimes you have to do whatever it takes to survive, and it's a messed up thing to say, especially in, like, I guess in our like, you it's easy to say that, "Oh, like, stuff like this doesn't happen anymore. We're in advanced society." But that's not necessarily the case. There are still places out there where it's kill or be killed, like, you have to do what you can to survive in your environment, and so I think that's why these moments are, like, really important because like, this game at least that we're talking about currently, like, it's not like this is ye olden times where, like, you have to fight wars over property to go ahead and stake your claim and let your bloodline live on.
Yeah, she has an
Like,
iPhone.
it's a yeah, exactly. So it's a very, like, present day, like, society, and so this idea that, like, this young girl who which I guess she's not so young, she's 21, but, like, in a sense, younger, like, at this day and age, like, people who are 21 often still rely on their parents. They're coming up to the end of college. Like, this idea of this youthfulness, it's like the end of that youthfulness. It's the end of the innocence, in a sense, of Laura's life. And it's like a big decision for her to decide to take that life, is I think what they're trying to do. They're trying to
Mhm,
show the weight of this decision that she's just made and the line that she's crossed, where in reality now you can't unkill somebody. You can't just control Z that and like it didn't happen. Like, huh, just kidding. Oops. No, that's not how it works.
mhm,
Like she took a human life and in reality there's no going back. And I'm sure like this experience as a whole, the reality of it is that I'm sure it would traumatize anybody. And maybe those are like repercussions and statuses that like affect her in later games as well.
mm,
Like this idea of survival and doing what has to be done in order to survive.
mm.
And so these moments are actually like my favorite. Like these very like gritty moments where like in some games, have you ever, I don't know if you've ever seen the games. There's the dark anthology
Yeah,
games where
yeah.
like those games in particular, like I love them, like these very like pivotal moments where it makes who your character becomes.
See, look,
And
I
I
watch
feel like
people play those games, but I only watch them where they play in the games where everybody survives because I don't wanna see
so I just have particular people who I enjoy watching, like,
Mhm,
content from, and I just see whatever they do.
mhm,
I'm like, "Okay, are we saving them or are we losing everybody?"
mhm.
And that's the reality.
Yeah,
My favorite one is specifically is Little Hope, and that game too, spoiler alert, if you don't mind me spoiling it, but
go ahead.
it's like a very similar circumstance of where at the end, regardless of how many people you save, you find out the whole time there's only one person. So it's the main character. And this whole time, all the other people have been in his head. And the reality of that is it's similar, I guess, in the sense for Laura, where there's so much going on around her, but at the end of the day, this one moment will it's her fate. It's nobody else's. And so what she chooses to make that decision, which she does, like obviously she has to live. She chooses to kill. But I think what I like about this one versus the original one, I feel like it makes it feel like more of a consequence. Like it's this very obviously that's probably like due to like progression and like technology and like the graphics. But obviously there was like a point where it's just oh you just mow down the enemy, pray and spray, take them down. And there's no consequences. Like you used to put freaking Butler in the dang freezer. Like it didn't matter. It didn't affect your gameplay. But now it's like stuff's really cooking. Like, Laura can't take that back. This is a war zone. She's trying to survive, and each life she takes is like its own cinematic moment of,
Yeah.
are you gonna survive? Make it? So I think I like it a lot. Like these latter 2 are definitely, like, the ones where I, like, act like, in the beginning, I was like, "Oh, yeah, I'm, like, learning this history," but, like, these latter 2, I was definitely a little more, like, invested in. I was like, "Oh, like, maybe I'll play that. Maybe, you know, when I get paid, I'll see what little pennies I rub together, and if I get the ambition, let me just buy it before I look at what's in my bank account and figure out I probably should." I'm kidding, I'm not that poor, okay? I promise I'm not that poor, but, you know, joke. You know, you gotta get land one every now and then.
Okay, so after this game, we also got the sequel to Lara Croft and the Guardian of Light, which was the Temple of Osiris. It was literally more of the same, but this time it even had even more emphasis on co-op. On the previous game, you could play with 2 players. On this game, you could play with up to 4. She's joined by other playable characters, her rival Carter Bell, the gods Isis, and Horus. And yeah, but they did his character design wrong, Carter Bell. I was like, "What is that?" But I'm not gonna get into that. That's all I'm gonna say. Let's move on to the bigger game, Rise of the Tomb Raider, 2015. This is where Microsoft for a while had an exclusive deal to get it first, which was annoying. But the game was great and eventually came to all the other consoles. It had like the game for the first like year or something, which was a long time. But the game was snowy, it was icy, and reintroduced the abilities like to the modern games, I should say, of swimming, the ability to leap over like tree branches. It was literally the true upgrade of the 2013 game. And it was also more combat heavy, which is interesting for these modern Tomb Raider games. They are very combat heavy. I used to watch reviews where people said it was not enough combat, but playing these games, to me, I felt like it was too much combat. But that's my opinion. I'm not getting to that. Okay. It focuses on Lara as she ventures into Siberia in search for the legendary city of Kitsag, while battling the paramilitary organization Trinity, which intends to uncover the city's promise of immortality. She is joined by her friend from the previous game, Jonah, and it focuses on her obsession with looking for answers after her supernatural experience on Yamatai. This prompts her maternal figure, Anna, which was her father's partner, to try and stop her from falling down the same path her father did. Of course, she doesn't listen and she gets herself into tons of trouble. Along the journey, she meets Constantine, the task force leader of Trinity, and learns that Anna is his sister and that they are trying to receive immortality. Anna asks Laura to
Yeah.
join them, but she refuses and is imprisoned where she meets a man named Jacob. He helps her on her journey, and they learn that Anna has a terminal illness that she and her brother are trying to cure by finding the divine source, which is later revealed to be connected to Jacob, who was giving immortality by it. He warns Laura that it bestows immortality to any who look upon it, but at the cost of their soul. Go figure. Which is stored in the
Dang.
source, which is stored in the source to prevent their death. She also learns from his daughter Sophia of the Deathless Ones, the immortal guardians of Kistek. Lara travels to the city of Kistek in order to stop Trinity. She fights Constantine, who, before he dies, reveals that her father didn't die, but was murdered by Trinity. Ooh, he loves to get murdered, her father, doesn't he? Lara follows
Yeah.
on
What a loser.
Yeah. Love follows Anna into the chamber that holds the divine source and tries to reason with her to no avail. Anna is overwhelmed by its power, which allows Laura to destroy it and cause the deathless ones to perish. This leads Jacob to lose his life in immortality, but he's happy dying, assuring Laura that she has made a difference before he peacefully disintegrates. Laura and Anna leave, with Laura asking her if she killed her father, and Anna tells her that she was given the order to by Trinity, but couldn't do it because she loved him. Before she can reveal
Mhm.
anything else, she is killed by a sniper who wants to kill Laura too, but is told to stand down for now. Laura tells Sophia about her
Dang.
father's passing in the end, and she vows to investigate more of the world's mysteries and to thwart Trinity's plans. So here's another question for you, Sabrina. The 2013 game specifically, do you think that it does a better job of centering her motivation around her parents than the 2006 games, or does it actually do a worse job?
Okay, so that's hard because I feel like this one, the newest one, I liked it a little more. Maybe that's just I like the delivery a little better. I like this idea of the hunt a little better. And also we start to get that team aspect that we talked about earlier, which I personally enjoy more in gameplay. This is one of those ones that I was like, "Oh, maybe I'll actually have to play this myself," kinda moment.
Mhm.
So, I feel like personally, I feel like it delivered a little better. Obviously, the original one still has its place. It has its fondness. It was the beginning of that, like, where it was very much centered around this new narrative of how she decided to become a Tomb Raider. But I definitely think, for me at least, I prefer the one that
Recent
came later.
ones? Yeah.
Yes.
I agree. I think that it expands on the story of her parents more. It gives it a bit more closure. Obviously, that both her parents are dead anyway in the other ones, and they give closure to that in Underworld. But I think they expand on it a bit more, and I think
Yeah.
it provides a good closing capture. I'm wondering how they're going to unify the timelines, particularly with those games too, seeing as both of them talk about the death of her parents. So I wonder how they're going to do that. Obviously, because they're unifying the timelines, not everything is gonna make it into it, because basically
Yeah.
unifying the timelines is basically saying you're just gonna reboot it again. You're just saying that you're just picking and choosing parts that are gonna stay and what aren't gonna stay, you know what I mean?
Yeah. That is to say, unless because they had the whole Dark Laura
Mhm.
timeline, like, kinda plot, what it they could pull a, like, multiverse, like, aesthetic of where the
Eh,
Lauras come together, but I just don't see that happening.
even for Tomb
But,
Raider that does mystical things, that's a bit too convoluted, I think.
yeah, I don't know. But I look forward to it. I'm sure it'll be good, or, I'm gonna hope it is, but you never know. Companies have surprised me before and come out of left
It better
field
be
and
good. They're
squashed all
doing
my
the whole thing
expectations.
about unifying the timeline. They taking forever to make this game. They make it animated to help with it and everything. It better be good. It better be good. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we have the third game of the trilogy and my personal favorite, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, which came out in 2018. This shows Laura becoming more of an obsessed treasure hunter, and it takes place 3 years after the previous game as she and Jonah venture out into the Americas to the legendary city of Patiti, battling Trinity and racing to stop a Mayan apocalypse that she has unleashed due to her obsession. It had really good puzzles that were complex, unique, and really fun. This is the game that the other two games, they had some tunes, but not enough. The first one had one tune, like one actual tune. The second one added a few more, but this one was like filled with tunes and puzzles. And it had the ability, because each one had the ability for you to have the thing where you can look like for hints and stuff and it'll show you colors. This one had the
Yeah.
ability to turn that. If you ever seen a Batman Arkham games, you will know what I'm talking about. You ever seen a Batman Arkham games? So they have
Oh,
this thing
I
called
say question mark.
they have this thing called detective vision. And so when you would turn on the detective vision, it will tell you the things that you need to interact with and how to like solve certain puzzles and things like that. So
Yeah.
they had that basically for these games, but what this game did, it gave you the ability to be able to turn it on or off, and that made the puzzles more fun. I played the whole game with all of it turned off because I wanted to solve the puzzles for myself. And I had a really good time because it was actually like I was exploring tombs. The game also, though, added a whole bunch of locales that were really fun. And in the previous locales, you didn't really have anybody except for like your enemies and some people that are involved in the story. And this one, you had people, you had locals in different places throughout the world and stuff. You can take quests and stuff. And so it showed that not every place was like this desolate place to explore. Like you explore in places where people are too. So that was fun and that's why it's my favorite. Tons of world building. So in this game, let me drink some tea.
Let me sip
Need
this
the
real
tea,
quick.
yeah, you might want to sip some tea for this story right here. This is the longest summary I got, so you better be ready. Lara faces a villain named Dominguez who wants to remake the world in his image. In this game, she is trying to solve several mysteries while also learning to acknowledge the fact that her obsession with solving the world's mysteries is dangerous. Literally, since she started the end of the world by taking the dagger of Chalk Shell without the box that it needs to prevent this. This is not the first time she's done this because if you remember in the original timeline, she also was over her head and almost caused the end of the world when she was against.
Causing problems again.
Yeah, yeah,
Girly pop.
yeah. So this also leads to a series of cataclysmic events that lead to the world's destruction. The first being a tsunami that she and Jonah have to escape, and it destroys the city filled with people that they were visiting. So she basically ends up killing a whole bunch of people. Jonah serves innocent people. Jonah serves a bigger role in this game as he helps to ground Laura and warn her that her obsessions are killing her. He plays a big role in the last game, but this one, he's like throughout the entire game. It even affects the gameplay as she's tougher with her enemies, killing them brutally, less out of necessity and kind of more because they just in her way. She, like Laura in this game, is tough. You can like hide in mud. Like she is brutal. She has muscles. She literally has muscles. And she will take you. And she's very brutal with her enemies in this game. It's ridiculous. It's cool though. So Laura and Jonah try to beat Dominguez and find the box of Ixchel needed to store the dagger before he can remake the world, despite the growing tensions between them. Due to the second cataclysm, a massive storm, they find the hidden city of Patiti and run into a boy named, I don't remember how to say his name, Etsley, and his mother, Unaratu, queen of the city. Dominguez is revealed to be a leader of a cult dedicated to the god Kukulkan. These people are gonna get me because I don't know what. I don't remember to pronounce it. The one with the power to cleanse the world. Unaratu directs Laura to the box, only for her to discover that it's already missing. The cult also captured Unaratu, and when Laura saves her, Unaratu ends up getting killed by Commander Rourke, her brother-in-law, and Amaru's second in command. Before she dies, Unaratu implores Laura to complete the ritual needed to stop the cleansing, but to not let the box influence her. Lara and Jonah leave Patiti, but are attacked by Rourke and are separated but reunited at an oil refinery to decipher the box's location. They discover the tomb that holds the box, but are caught by Amaru, who forces her to surrender it. He tells her he ordered her father's death to prevent him from finding. Why am I saying like I just remembered this? Like I just found out about this. He ordered her father's death to prevent him from finding Patiti and revealing it to the world. The third cataclysm, a massive earthquake, starts causing a landslide that she and Jonah need to escape. They head back to Patiti and help the newly crowned Etsley lead an assault that stops Amaru's cleansing ceremony and avoids the fourth cataclysm. Lara goes alone, encountering the Yaxel and Crimson Fire, convincing them to help her stop Amaru. The Yaxel slaughter Rourke and the Trinity High Council as Laura makes her way to Amaru, who starts the rituals and absorbs Kukulkan's powers. The two have a lengthy battle, leading to Lara stabbing and defeating him, and him transferring the power to Lara, who is now tempted to revive her parents, whom she thinks about and has several flashbacks about often throughout the game. But in a show of her strength, Lara instead allows the Crimson Fire to symbolically stab her, sacrificing Kukulkan's spirit and stopping the cleansing. In the end, they lay Unuratu to rest, and Jonah decides to take a vacation. Lara stays in Patiti to help Etsley restore the city to its former glory. And a post-credit scene shows Lara and a cameo from my favorite Butler Winston, this is his first and only time appearing in the trilogy, comes in as she plans her next adventure at Croft Manor, stating that her role isn't to solve the mysteries of the world, but to protect them. Whew. Now, Sabrina,
Bam.
what do you think about the newer portrayals of Lara Croft, turning her into a more heroic character? She's always been a character that stops the evil, but mostly because it's been in her way. Now they transformed her into a more heroic character because she feels like she needs to save the world. What do you feel about that?
Okay, so I would just like to say I'm not like heroes are cool and all, but I love a more like morally gray kind of character.
Mhm.
So up until this point, I appreciated the idea that Laura is like this woman trying to survive. And so if that means like kicking some butt and taking names along the way, then I fully support that. But at the same time, like I don't think that every person who ends up saving the world should be like made into a hero, if that makes sense. Yeah, it's a nice turn. Like she's always been like this very powerful and like a symbol of women empowerment, if you will. Like a strong woman who will take matters into her own hands. But I didn't feel like she needed to become a hero for that to still stand, if you will.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? It's nice that I guess in a sense she's being appreciated by the world around her, if you will. Like it allows her to in a sense like accrue more fame and sets a name for herself. You feel like maybe this is how she gets that identity as like the Lara Croft in this world. But at the same time, I feel like it's almost like I say it's unneeded. Like I it happened. It's a good game. I like the ending. Like you said, it's one of the best. This one and the last one are definitely the two that I might end up trying to play.
Play the whole trilogy,
But
actually, so you can get the full story. It's so
probably
good.
yeah. But as, like, the final, like, where she started, if you will, in this trilogy, as, like, fighting for her life, like, taking her first kill, I liked that rawness of just survival. Like, the point of this, like, surviving in a world that isn't always on your side versus, "Oh, she saves the world. She's such a great hero." No, my girl was just trying to get home, dog. Like, she's just trying to make it out of the sticks.
Yeah,
Like, the idea that they wanted to make it, like, I guess, give it this
right.
happy, like, little sunshine moment, like, I appreciate that, but I feel like it was unneeded. Like, my girl Laura didn't need you to give her a reason for why she did what she did.
Yeah.
She just did it.
Yeah, the original Laura really just Tomb Raider for sport because she liked doing it, and she likes doing it now,
Yeah.
but they try to give her reasons to obsess over it, and it puts her on this heroic journey because Laura was never a villain, but she Tomb Raided because that's what she liked to do. So, I found that interesting. So, after this game, though, in May 2022, Square Enix sold the development studios and their IPs to Sweden's Mighty Embracer Group. Tomb Raider is one of those games that was sold, and so now they are the one developing the new Tomb Raider game that's in the works. One final question for you, Sabrina. Before we have this new unified Laura, I want to ask you, which version of Lara
Mhm.
Croft do you think is the best? The 3 versions I've introduced to you, which one do you think is the best?
Like, from the 3 timelines?
Mhm.
I'm gonna be I feel like this is, like, a really so I hate picking answers that are, like, I say obviously the most popular. I know, like, people are gonna agree with me, if you will, but my favorite, to be basic, if you will, I like the newest one. I like the new time like, the present
Girl,
Laura.
you ain't basic, I'm gonna tell you that. Because most Tomb Raider fans do not prefer the new timeline. They go
Like,
in a uproar. They're like, "It's not my
I
Lara
will
Croft."
say, I hate to say this, but I don't like the if you will, the oh, what's the word? I don't like the hero Laura, but definitely, like, the beginning of this trilogy, the final trilogy, like, that Laura and maybe the second one, I'm definitely, like, I resonate with them more. Like, this,
I'll say
a more
she's her less heroic in the 3rd game. I will say that. She goes on a journey to get rid of the obsession, and that's when she becomes more of a hero. But, like,
mhm.
she is obsessed, and when people get in her way, she really does become very quite, let's just say, anti-hero-ish, I should say, which puts her in a lot of at odds with Jonah a lot too. So I will say she's her least heroic in the 3rd game of the trilogy. That's what I will say. So, what do you think about Tomb Raider, Sabrina? How did this make you feel about the franchise that you probably didn't know that much about?
I was about to say, it definitely took me to a whole new world, like, I was not anticipating to be as, like, involved as I was, like,
Mhm.
to be honest, so my job, I'm very fortunate, I can just pop on some tunes and do my job sometimes, and so that day at work when we first talked about doing the podcast and you sent me that video about the history of Tomb Raider, I popped it on, and, like, in the beginning, like I said, I wasn't as invested, I was like, "Oh, yeah, this is, like, how most games started during this time period, the block system, like, the models, but then as the longer it played, I was kinda like, "Oh," I slowly realized I was more invested than I anticipated in this video and, like, the history and, like, the drama, if you will, of, like, this corporation and how they mistreated their employees and the drama that arose from, like, a new studio
I
taking
kinda
on
knew
the
behind the
project
scenes
and,
stuff.
like, how they were competing and people were getting dusted and all this the muck of it all.
Mhm.
Meanwhile, Laura is just trying to be Laura,
Yeah.
and
You just living her life,
I enjoyed it.
being
I
aristocrats,
enjoyed
shooting
it.
up animals.
But yeah, like I said, I will admit I was very surprised with how much I enjoyed it, but I enjoyed it. That was, like, the big thing, like, it was nice. Something different. We've been doing a lot of shows, like, the
Yeah.
game was, like, a nice breakup.
Yeah, games, woof, that was extensive. The research that I had to do for this, you guys, oh my gosh.
Don't even get me started, I'm stressing about Princess Peach.
She has an even more extensive, like,
History, yeah.
yeah, history. She has, like, almost 10 years on Laura. So,
I'm screwed, y'all.
yeah, so I don't know what to tell you, but we love Princess Peach. It's great.
No, I'm trying not to see spoilers for the game. I, like, wanna watch them so bad, but I'm trying to go in, like, completely blind,
Yeah.
like, to the new game.
I'll just say she has way more transformations than you might think. That's all I'm gonna say.
Ah,
Just to get you excited.
okay.
Just to get you excited.
Don't even get me. I'm already excited, Kaiser. I got that thing on pre-order. We waiting. I'm camping.
Oh,
I'm
Lord.
so excited.
Whatever happened to mail and Amazon? Oh, Lord, sis.
Oh,
Okay, thank you, everybody, for listening
yeah.
to this episode. We hope you enjoyed. We hope you learned a little bit more about Tomb Raider than you might have known before if you known about the franchise. If you never knew about the franchise, I'm so sorry, but I'm glad you listened to this episode and that we introduced it to you. Go check out the Tomb Raider Remastered Trilogy that came out on February 14th, 2024. Make sure you also check out the Tomb Raider Reboot Trilogy that started in 2013 and ended in 2018. And maybe, just maybe, check out the Legend games too. Don't worry about playing the older games because they've been remastered. And you never know, you might get a remaster of the last 4 of those games eventually. Thanks everyone for listening. Love you guys. Bye, fanatics.
Bye. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for the newest episode of the So I'm a Fan of podcast.
Don't forget to support us by leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify so that we can reach out to as many people as we can.
And you can view our socials at IAFO Fan on X, formerly known as Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, and Reddit.
And our merch at iafofans.com. We have lots of exciting things in store for you, so come and listen to us next time. See you, fellow fanatics.
Peace.